Okay, welcome back to the PMGS StampFix app. I've been putting the finishing touches on version 1.11. Fixes a few bugs and adds a significant new feature. So as with version 1.10, I thought I'd do another little demo video to kind of walk you through how to use the new features of version 1.11. Before we get to the new stuff, a quick note on bug fix. I did have a user who sent me this where when he attempted to rotate and crop the stamp, it didn't work correctly because of all this garbage in the corners. When you take a rectangular scan of a stamp and then you rotate it, the rectangle is, of course, no longer rectangular, and the software has to fill in the gaps with something. And there's several different options for that. The option that I was using would take the whatever pixel color was along the outside and just expand that color to the outside. Which works just fine if you're using a background that's predominantly a solid color, solid black, solid white, something along those lines. However, with a background like this, which is black with a little bit of gray and some kind of threads and just a motley appearance, you can tell that those varying colors cause this rainbow effect, which then threw off the crop attempt because the various color differences caused the software to not be able to accurately detect the edges. So I've changed this algorithm so that instead of using those pixel colors and expanding them out, it just grabs one pixel color and uses it, so that should be a solid color now, and hopefully that will solve the problem with the accuracy of the rotation in the crop. If you do still have trouble in that regard and you're seeing things like this, the solution is usually to try to find a more solid color background than the one you're currently using, because that is the solution to 90% of the problems with the processing on these things, is changing the background to something that's a little more suitable. Okay, now on to the new features. One new feature I'll show you before I get to the big one. I did add the ability to set a prefix on your naming system with regards to the batch processing. So now you can do a prefix and a suffix when you do batch file processing. Okay, the big feature that I've added, in the past you could do batch processing of an entire folder, batch processing of a series of files. Well, now you can do batch processing from a single image. So for example, you could take a scan like this, which has 30 stamps in it, load it up, process it, and it would take those 30 stamps and extract them out into 30 separate files. So, not only will it rotate and crop, but it will also take them all from a single source and export them out as part of the rotation, crop, and save. And I'm going to walk you through how to do that process, because it can be a little bit complicated until you figure out exactly how the settings work and exactly which settings work best for your setup. So to get it started, you click on Batch Image, and I'm going to load that same file that I was just looking at there. Okay, this is a pretty low resolution scan, so it's very useful for a demo because it loads really fast. It's a very small file, just an old image that I found laying around on my hard drive. You'll see some new settings along the left-hand side here, and I'll go down exactly what these are and exactly what they have to do with the bright green boxes that you see around the stamps. The way that the software works is it takes the image and then it tries to break it down into the smaller parts of the individual stamps, and then it processes those individual smaller parts. And the boxes that you see are its attempt to separate out those individual parts. Now, when you first load it up and you first load an image, you won't get a nice clean result like this. The only reason I'm getting a nice clean result like this is I happen to have already had my settings set for this particular image. Now, as to these settings that are on the left-hand side, the first one you see is the threshold setting. And this is the same threshold setting that we went over in version 1.10 that's on this particular setting screen. The app detects that I'm using a black background and loads this value and puts it in that blank. If I was using a white background, that would have loaded up as 210 instead of 100, because the app can tell what the background color is, and it uses that particular color. This block is here really just to make it a little easier for you to tweak it and get the results you want. So instead of having to constantly go back here, change it on this screen, and then go hit recalculate, and then go back and change it a little bit more and hit recalculate, I just moved it out here for the purposes of this so you don't have to jump around within the app. Changing it here in this particular location does not change the main default setting that's on this screen. The only place you can change your main default for the thresholds is on this particular screen. What the tolerance controls is how tight the box is to the stamps. A setting of 1 is going to lock it down right to the edge of the stamps. I don't recommend that because, again, there's a little fuzziness around the edges with regards to how accurately it can detect the edges. And if you set it right to the edge, you're going to lose detail from around the edges of the stamp. So you want to up that just a little bit. 1.1 increases the box size by 10%. 1.2 is 20%. You don't want to get too high with it because, for example, if I go up to 1.3, you'll see that like this box on this brown stamp is catching the edge of the green stamp next to it, and that little bit of extra white and green in this box will completely frustrate your ability to rotate and crop that stamp. So you want to get it to a size where the box contains the stamp and only the stamp and none of its neighbors. That's also the importance of not having your stamps extremely close together when you scan them on the scanner. I have an image I'll use to show you here. Let's see. Okay, on this particular image, you can ignore some of the extra boxes here. Let me see if I can get rid of some of those strays. You'll notice that on some of these, when it tries to draw the boxes, it's so difficult for it to get just the stamp and not catch its neighbor next to it. Especially when they're at any kind of angle. The box has to be extra big to account for the angle, and it just makes it very difficult for the app to accurately calculate the boxes and to avoid catching the neighbors when these things are so close together. As with anything, the quality of the output that you're going to get from the app is only as good as the quality of the input that you put in it. So my recommendation is to make sure your stamps have some spacing when you scan them on the scanner, and also regardless of whether they're oriented right side up or tilted 90 degrees to one side or upside down, if you can keep them in a fairly square orientation, it works best because, again, when you put a little bit of angle to it, the box has to be extra big to account for the angle, and it just causes that many more problems with trying to keep it separated from its neighbor. We'll go back to that. That's not it. There it is. Test image I had here, and I'll go over what the rest of these settings are. I'm going to set these are the minimum and maximum box sizes, and if I set the minimum size down to 0, it will show you every single box that the software calculated. What it does when it initially processes the image is it tries to find everything that it thinks is important. Now you'll notice it found a lot. This number down at the bottom tells you how many boxes it found. It found 409 boxes on this screen. Ideally, this number before you process and save them should be identical to the number of stamps that you have on the page. If you get your settings just right, that's the way it works best, is if that number was at 30, because there's 30 stamps on the screen right now. You'll notice that some of these stamps have black overprints, and it's picking out the black overprints and separating them from the background, and that's why you end up with a lot of these little boxes. If you were to try to process this right now, it would return errors and not process for you, because the larger boxes, like maybe this large one right here, that would probably process. You would get a goofy result that wouldn't make any sense, but it would at least process. But some of these that, there's a box that's probably no more than a couple pixels wide and a couple pixels tall. The software would choke on trying to process that because the math just wouldn't work out, and it would pop up an error message. So your goal in getting an accurate processing should be to get rid of all the extraneous boxes so that you just have the boxes that are around the stamps. And that's what the size adjustments and the threshold adjustment allow you to do. So if I start bumping this lower size adjustment up, you'll see a lot of the smaller boxes disappear. There's still got a few strays on the interior, so if I up it to 75, you'll see a few more disappear. 100. Still have one stray down here in the bottom. We'll go up a little bit more, 115, and now he's gone. Your ideal size on your minimum box size should be just below the size of your smallest box that you have on screen. That way you, you can be sure you don't get any strays. The maximum box size is on there. You'll rarely need this. When you're using a black background, you'll probably never need it. When you're using a white background, every once in a while the software will draw a box around the entire image. And it's a bit confusing because you don't always see it. And so the number down here in the bottom will sometimes be off by 1, and you just cannot find where that stray box is, and it's because it's around the whole image. So I'll put in this maximum box size so that you can adjust that and try to keep all the strays away. So ideally, the minimum size should be just a bit smaller than your smallest box, and your maximum size should be just a little bit larger than your largest box size. But you'll know when you got them when the numbers add up. 30 boxes for 30 stamps. Now, if I didn't have any other processing I wanted to do on these, meaning everybody's oriented the right direction, everybody's right side up, I like the name settings that I have on my batch screen, and I like the image settings that I have on my image screen, I could process these right now and just output them by clicking this Go button. If I go to my output over here, so you can see them as they process, I'm just going to go ahead and hit Go. And you'll see the little progress bar go. It says 30 of 30. And if I go over here on the right and flip through them, now these are low quality images because this was a low resolution source. But you'll see they all got extracted, cropped, rotated. Now, it probably won't be very often that you have a nice, clean, everything's already set and your names are already set and you're just ready to go. So that's why there's this naming option on here that allows you to customize a lot of that. Now, with regards to how the software actually does the names, with the batch folder and the batch file options, every file you were processing already had a file name, and so it was very easy. But with the batch image, you have one file name from this image, and you're splitting it into 30 separate images here. So we have to come up with a way to give them all distinct names. And the way it does that by default is it takes your prefix, inserts a number, and then adds your suffix. And that number is just gonna start from 1 and work its way up. So when I ran those, I don't know if you noticed. Here, I'll run it again. Okay, in the output folder, it's just my prefix and then the number from 1 up to 30, since there were 30 stamps here. They're not necessarily in the order that they're shown on the screen. The order in which it assigns the number is based on the order in which it found that stamp when it was drawing the boxes, which tends to be from the lower left to the upper right in that order. I am working for future versions on a way to allow you to kind of customize that, because I know sometimes when you're scanning a set of stamps, you want to be able to set a number that matches the catalog number automatically. It just doesn't do that yet. It'll do the prefix, the suffix, and it will just assign an integer number to the middle there until you get them all done. Okay. Now, let's say that you had an image that didn't have the same level of nicety to it already, like this one. You see I've got stamps here that are turned the wrong direction, and so this one's going to require a little bit of extra work to get it like I want it. Now, you'll notice when I pull it up, there's a lot of extra boxes on the screen here, as there was with the previous image. This is a much higher resolution image. I scanned this one at 600 dpi. So the same size setting that worked with that low resolution image is not going to work with this one, because there's so many more pixels. I'm going to have to up that number significantly more to get rid of some of the smaller boxes. I'm going to up it to 500. I know from experimenting with this image that that's about right. All right, you'll notice it got rid of a lot of the interior extra boxes, but we still have extra boxes around the outside of a few of these stamps. There isn't a good way to get rid of those boxes using just your size adjustments, because, for example, you take this box, which is probably the biggest box on the screen. If you adjusted the minimum size up sufficient to lose these innermost two boxes and leave just the outer one, you would also have gotten rid of, for example, this small box, because when that size number got up too high, that small box would disappear as well. So At a certain point, you can't use the size adjustment to get rid of these extras that are around the outside of the stamp. That's where the threshold number comes in again. There is almost always a combination of size adjustment and threshold adjustment that will get you where you need to be. I know from toying around with this one that the number for this particular image is 30 on the threshold. And if I hit recalculate, you will see the extra boxes go away, and I now have 12 images, 12 boxes for 12 stamps. I can go to now once I got them where I have the right number of boxes, I'm going to go to the naming screen. So I'll click naming. You'll see this progress bar down in the bottom right. It is actually cropping and rotating all of those stamps and then displaying them on this screen. This is a screen that allows you to set your file names and to do any kind of extra processing you want to do. And there's a lot of stuff on this screen, so let me just walk through it and explain what everything is. Under each stamp, you have a set of options. You have a checkbox. The checkbox, if it's checked, it's going to include that stamp when it saves everything. If there's for some reason a stamp that you don't want to be included when you do your save, all you got to do is uncheck that box. So for example, I'll uncheck that one and you'll see what it does here in a minute when I hit reprocess. The boxes underneath the images, the first one is an individual threshold adjustment. This is your file name. This is your file extension. This is your initial rotation, your final rotation, and your padding. So these boxes basically match the ones that are along the bottom here, with the exception that you have your file name that's not down here, and you have your prefix and suffix combined into one box for the file name. What these boxes along the bottom do is allow you to make a global change across all of the stamps. And as with the previous screen, this information is pulled from your data that you had on your normal toolbar here at the bottom and your defaults, simply so that you don't have to leave this screen to go tweak those settings. Changing these does not change your actual defaults. These are just temporary boxes for use while you're working on this screen. And changing anything down here and hitting apply is going to apply it globally across all of these. If you have made individual changes to these boxes on the individual stamps, and then you apply a global change, the global change will overwrite your changes you've already made. So when you make changes to these, you need to make your global changes first, and then go in and make your individual changes on the individual stamps. For example, let's say I want to change the prefix on all of these to Carolina. Okay, I type it in there. I hit apply. It's going to pop up a warning, and that warning is simply to remind me that if I do hit OK, it's going to overwrite all of these individual settings with the ones that are in the global, and I'll hit OK. And now you can see all the prefixes have been reset to now say Carolina. And now I can go through and I can just individually make edits to the stamps. Like this one is rotated the wrong way, so we'll add a -90 initial rotation on that one. We'll add a 90-degree rotation on that one. And we'll add a 180-degree rotation on that one. And when I get all of those little adjustments made like I need to make them, I hit reprocess. It's going to take a second to process. You'll now notice that this stamp is grayed out. That's because I unchecked the checkbox on that one. So the gray out tells me that one's not going to get saved. And when I scroll down here to the right, the ones that I put the rotation adjustment on are now properly rotated. And when I get everything set like I want it, all I have to do is hit save. It's going to run through them right quick. It will tell me 11 of 11 saved and one image was skipped by the user. That one is the one that I unchecked the checkbox on. And now over here in my output folder, you can see, there they are, all properly processed. Now, it will also do white. If I go load up an image that's on white, you'll notice the threshold setting has changed to 210. It pulled that again from my default here once it detected that white was the color. And it actually already pulled an accurate 12 boxes for 12 stamps, so I already had the settings roughly where they needed to be. Because it was the exact same image as the previous one, the 500 number still worked with these. I will show you one extra thing here. If I drop the threshold down, I'm sorry, not the threshold. Don't want to do that. That'll completely throw things out of whack. If I drop the min size down to 0 here and hit recalculate, you'll notice it now shows 14 boxes, but there's only 12 stamps. But you don't see 2 extra boxes on the screen. As I mentioned before, sometimes if there's this really tiny box, you won't necessarily see it, and it will throw off your attempt to process. So if I was to hit naming right now, it's going to try, and then it's going to tell me that it couldn't finish it. 12 of 14 were processed successfully. That means there's 2 extra boxes floating around on the screen. Now, don't know if you can see it terribly well. Oh. I forgot when I'm recording the screen, I can't use the view function there, or the zoom function. There's 2 extra boxes right at the bottom of that stamp. There's one little dot right there and one little dot right there. So that's the importance of making sure that your size adjustment is in there to get rid of those, so that now we have 12. We can actually go ahead to the next step. Again, I can go back to the naming screen. It'll process them right quick. You know, I go in, I make the same adjustments I made when I was doing the black version. I hit reprocess. They're all ready to go. I hit save. 12 of 12 saved. And there they are. Now this thing is capable of cranking through quite a few in a hurry. I have an image here that was scanned. This is a 600 DPI scan of the entire bed of my large format flatbed scanner. So this is a 12 by 18 inch 600 DPI scan with 63 stamps on it. This image file took a little bit longer to load. That's a 123 megabyte image file, which is why it took that much longer. You'll see it's got 86 boxes on here. I happen to know there are 63 images on here, so I've got to do a little tweaking to get that number down. You can zoom in and out with these view buttons to kind of get a better idea of if you need to zoom in and take a look at the boxes. The zoom function is a little slow with an image of this size because, like I said, it's 123 megabytes. It takes it a little bit to process it. I happen to know from playing with this one that a good threshold setting of 30, and I hit recalculate, and I should come out at 63 boxes. Again, it takes a second on an image of this size. So now I have 63 stamps with 63 boxes. Again, this is a good illustration of the value of having the stamps roughly in a square or rectangular orientation before you start. They don't have to be right side up. Just get them in a rectangular orientation and not having them too close together. Because I was able to scan this 12 inch by 18 inch 63 stamps and get 63 boxes fairly easily, simply because I put enough space between the stamps and got them oriented in a rectangular pattern before I started. Now if I go to naming, it's going to take it a minute because it has to process all 63 of those images. Okay, now it's going to pop up this box. And again, you know, I can go through and make individualized adjustments on a lot of these, but the one reason I wanted to show this particular scan, as I scroll through here, we'll hit a few images that just aren't right. Like, take a look at this one. This is number 18. The rotation being off obviously makes it a little harder to see this, but you can tell that there's a lot of extra space around the bottom of that stamp and around that edge up at the top. That is because the threshold adjustment is off slightly with regards to this particular stamp. I used a threshold adjustment of 30 on the entire image, but some stamps may need some individualized adjustment. And normally that is because there's a little bit of debris near that stamp on the scanner bed that is causing that. It's picking up a little bit of extra white from somewhere, and it's causing the scanner to think that that little bit of white is part of the stamp. For example, number 35 here, there's a little piece of white debris right there, and that is causing it to think that that's the edge of the stamp. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw a -90 rotation on that one, and I'm going to throw a threshold adjustment of 100 to see if that solves it. I'm not going to bother going down the rest of these, and then I'll just hit reprocess. It's going to take a minute to reprocess all of those. Okay, now that it's done, I take a look at number 35, and in addition to being rotated, that threshold adjustment of 100 fixed the problem. So now it's nice and clean. And if I scroll back to 18, which was the other one I was looking at, sure enough, that one got fixed as well. So it's a matter of just finding the right threshold number. That's why the individualized threshold setting is on each individual stamp, because sometimes you will need to do a little individual tweaking on them. See, there's another one. Change that one to 100. We'll do 180 rotation on that one while we're down here. Hit reprocess. It'll run through again. And there you go. Fixed it. All right, and when I get them all set like I want them, again, I'll pull up my output folder so you can see what it's going to do here. Get rid of those. And if I hit save, it's going to have a lot that are oriented improperly, but you'll get the point here. There are now 63 individual images that are properly cropped, and if I put the rotation adjustment in, properly rotated. So that's 63 images, and it took me no more than a couple minutes to do that. So works like a charm. So give it a try. Download it, run some stuff through it. Let me know what you think. If you have any problems, feel free to let me know. And we'll continue working on some future options for it. So give it a try.